The cup slipped from Lyriel Voss's fingers and shattered across the stone floor. The sound echoed through the Alpha Hall like a gunshot. Every head turned. She stood frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed against her stomach, breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. 6 weeks pregnant, the scent of rain clung to her cloak, the scent of blood lingered in the hall, and at the center of it all stood Cadrin Halvern, the Alpha of Iron Ridge, his golden eyes cold as winter. "Say it again," Lyriel whispered. The pack formed a half circle around them. Warriors, betas, elders. No one spoke. Kedron didn't even hesitate. "You heard me," he said flatly. "You are not my mate." The words landed harder than any blow. Lyriel felt something inside her chest fracture. She shook her head slowly. "That's impossible." Her wolf whimpered deep inside her soul. "We felt the bond," she said. "You felt it too." Cadron's gaze flicked briefly to her stomach, then away, as if the sight disgusted him. "Whatever you think you felt was a mistake." The room erupted in murmurs. Lyriel's nails dug into her palm. "I'm carrying your child." Silence. Cadron's jaw tightened, but his expression didn't change. "You will not spread that lie in my pack." The humiliation burned hotter than fire. "A lie?" Lyriel's voice cracked. "You marked me 3 months ago." Several wolves exchanged uneasy glances. Dravenholt, the pack beta, shifted near the throne platform but said nothing. Cadron stepped down from the raised dais slowly, boots striking the stone floor with deliberate calm. "That mark," he said, voice low, "meant nothing." The words hollowed the air from her lungs. She remembered that night vividly. Moonlight pouring through the forest canopy, his arms around her, his teeth grazing her neck, and the heat of the mate bond igniting between them. It had been real. She knew it. Cadron stopped only a few feet away now, towering over her. His scent, cedarwood and storm clouds, twisted painfully inside her chest. Lyriel forced herself to meet his gaze. "Look me in the eyes and deny it." For a moment something flickered there. Regret, fear, then it vanished. "I deny it." Gasps rippled through the hall. Lyriel felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, another voice cut through the tension. "Because he has no choice." All heads turned. Seraphine Halvorn stood at the balcony above the hall, the Alpha's mother. Her silver hair shimmered like frost under the torchlight. She descended the staircase slowly, every step precise. The air shifted around her like a gathering storm. Lyriel's wolf shrank instinctively. Seraphine's gaze landed on Lyriel's stomach. "How unfortunate." Lyriel clenched her jaw. "You knew." Seraphine's smile held no warmth. "Of course." "Then you know the child is his." "No," Seraphine replied calmly. "The child is a problem." The words slammed into Lyriel harder than Cadron's rejection. The Alpha said nothing. He didn't defend her. He didn't even look at her. Seraphine circled slowly, examining Lyriel like a piece of flawed merchandise. "Iron Ridge cannot afford scandal," she continued, "especially not when the council arrives in 2 days." Lyriel frowned. "Council?" Draven finally spoke, his voice tight. "The High Alpha Council." The room buzzed with whispers. Lyriel's pulse quickened. The High Alpha Council only gathered for matters that affected the entire Northern Territories. She looked back at Cadron. "What are you hiding?" He remained silent. Seraphine answered instead. "An alliance." She turned toward the gathered pack. "Our Alpha will soon take a chosen mate." Lyriel felt the floor vanish beneath her. "Chosen?" Seraphine's eyes gleamed. Isolde Thornvale. Shock ripped through the hall. The Thornvale clan ruled the largest territory in the north. An alliance with them would make Iron Ridge nearly untouchable. Lyriel stared at Cadron. "You're marrying someone else." He didn't deny it. "The ceremony will be announced at the council gathering." Her stomach twisted violently. She pressed a hand against it instinctively. Her child. His child, and he was discarding them like they meant nothing. "You can't do this," she whispered. Seraphine's gaze hardened. You will leave Iron Ridge before dawn. Lyriel looked between them. You're banishing me? No, Seraphine said coolly. We're sparing you. The hall doors creaked open behind Lyriel. A cold wind rushed inside, carrying the scent of pine and distant thunder. Seraphine's voice dropped lower. If the council learns that our alpha impregnated a lowborn wolf outside an approved union, the consequences will be severe. Lyriel's spine stiffened. Lowborn, the insult sliced deep. She had spent years proving her worth inside Iron Ridge. She hunted, she fought, she bled beside them, and now she was nothing again. You think I'll just disappear? She asked quietly. Seraphine's smile returned. You have little choice. Lyriel looked back at Kadrin. One last chance. Tell her she's wrong. The alpha's face remained carved from stone. Leave. That single word shattered whatever hope remained inside her chest. Her wolf howled in agony. Lyriel swallowed the pain rising in her throat. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She turned slowly, stepping over the broken porcelain shards on the floor. Every step toward the doors felt heavier than the last. But just before she reached them, a sharp scent hit her nose. Smoke, wolf blood, and something ancient. Her wolf stirred uneasily. Lyriel paused. A shadow moved near the far wall. Barely visible among the torches, a tall warrior stood there watching. His eyes burned an eerie shade of silver. She had never seen him before. He didn't belong to Iron Ridge, and yet he looked at her as if he knew exactly who she was. The stranger inclined his head slightly, then he mouthed 3 silent words. Run. Cold dread crawled down Lyriel's spine. Behind her, Seraphine's voice rang out again. Escort her out. 2 enforcers stepped forward. But before they reached her, the stranger moved. With impossible speed, he slipped through the side exit and vanished into the storm outside. Lyriel's wolf growled softly. That scent. She had smelled it once before, long ago, but she couldn't remember where. Draven grabbed her arm. Come on. Lyriel pulled away. Don't touch me. He hesitated. Then his voice dropped low enough only she could hear. If you're smart, he muttered, you'll leave before the council arrives. Why? Draven glanced toward the balcony where Seraphine stood watching. Because if they discover the truth about you... He didn't finish the sentence. Lyriel stepped out into the cold night air. The storm had begun. Rain soaked her cloak instantly. Thunder rolled. Across the mountains behind Iron Ridge territory, she wrapped her arms around herself instinctively. Her wolf trembled inside her chest. Pregnant. Rejected. Banished. But something else twisted beneath the pain. A memory. The stranger's silver eyes, and the way her wolf had reacted to his scent. Like recognition. Lyriel looked down at her stomach. The child inside her shifted faintly, a tiny spark of life, and suddenly the wind carried distant howls, not from Iron Ridge, from somewhere far beyond the mountains. Her wolf lifted its head, alert. For the first time since the rejection, it wasn't crying. It was listening. Lyriel Voss did not look back when the Iron Ridge gate slammed shut behind her. Rain poured through the forest in cold silver sheets. The mountain path twisted downward between black pines and jagged rock. Her boots slipped in the mud twice before she steadied herself. A sharp ache pulsed through her stomach. She slowed instinctively and pressed a hand there. Easy, she whispered. Her wolf stirred weakly. The baby was still too small to feel, but something deep inside her already knew this life mattered more than anything she had ever fought for. Lightning cracked across the sky. Thunder rolled down the valley like an avalanche. Lyriel pulled her cloak tighter and kept walking. Iron Ridge territory ended at the ravine 3 miles south. She had crossed that border dozens of times during patrols, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she was leaving as prey. Not pack, not family, not even acknowledged as the alpha's mate. The humiliation burned hotter with every step. She replayed Kadrin's voice in her mind. You are not my mate. The words cut deeper each time. She stopped suddenly, gripping a tree trunk as dizziness swept over her. Pregnancy, She had barely begun to adjust to the reality of it. Now she was alone in a storm. Her wolf growled softly inside her mind. Not alone. Lyriel frowned. What do you mean? The wolf pushed forward, senses stretching through the forest. The scent came again. Wood smoke, steel, and something ancient. Her head snapped up. Someone was nearby? A twig cracked behind her. She spun, instincts rising instantly. Show yourself. The forest answered with silence. Then a tall figure stepped out from between the trees. It was the stranger from the hall. His silver eyes glowed faintly in the stormlight. Rain darkened his black coat, but he didn't seem bothered by the cold. Lyriel's pulse quickened. You followed me. No, the man said calmly. I waited. His voice was deep, steady, unfamiliar. She studied him carefully. He looked around 30 years old with sharp cheekbones and dark hair pulled loosely behind his neck. A long scar ran from his temple to his jawline. His presence felt powerful, but not aggressive. Who are you? She demanded. He ignored the question. You need to leave this mountain tonight. Lyriel crossed her arms defensively. I already am. Not far enough. His silver eyes flicked briefly. Toward the distant Iron Ridge cliffs. When the council arrives tomorrow, they will search for you. Her stomach dropped. Search? Yes. He stepped closer now, boots crunching wet leaves. Because your existence threatens something far bigger than pack politics. Lyriel stared at him. I have no idea what you're talking about. You will. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face fully. Her wolf reacted instantly. Not fear, not anger, recognition. Lyriel felt it like a spark under her skin. Have we met before? She asked quietly. The stranger hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his expression. No, he said slowly. But our bloodlines have. Confusion twisted inside her chest. Bloodlines? He studied her face carefully. Tell me something, Lyriel Voss. Her eyes narrowed. How do you know my name? Because I have been looking for you for 10 years. The words hit like a blow. She stepped back instinctively. That's impossible. Is it? The stranger reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver pendant. It glowed faintly even in the storm. Lyriel's breath caught. She knew that symbol, a crescent moon wrapped around a crown, her father's crest. The pendant slipped from the man's fingers and landed softly in her palm. Where did you get this? She whispered. Your father gave it to me. Her heart slammed against her ribs. My father died when I was 14. No, the man said quietly. He disappeared. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. Lyriel stared at him, disbelief swirling through her thoughts. You're lying. I wish I were. He leaned against a tree, rain dripping from his hair. Your father is Eldrick Voss. I know that. Then you should also know what he was. Lyriel's wolf stirred again, uneasy now. He was a warrior, she said slowly. Once. The stranger shook his head. No. His silver eyes locked onto hers. He was the last heir of the Lunar Crown. The words struck like thunder. Lyriel blinked. That's a myth, is it? He gestured toward the pendant still glowing faintly in her hand. That symbol belonged to the royal bloodline of the first wolves. Her mind reeled. The Lunar Crown. Legends whispered among elders. Stories of wolves born with power tied directly to the moon. But those stories were ancient. Forgotten. If that were true, Lyriel said, every alpha in the north would know? Exactly. The stranger pushed away from the tree. And if they discover you are his daughter... His gaze drifted briefly toward her stomach, and carrying his bloodline forward, cold dread spread through her veins. They would kill me. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Rain continued pouring through the branches above. Lyriel struggled to steady her breathing. Who are you? She asked again. The stranger looked at her for a long moment, then he finally answered. Torvin Kyle. The name struck a distant memory. She had heard it once, years ago, In whispers among warriors. The rogue commander, she said quietly. Torvin's mouth twitched faintly. Rogue according to the council. Lyriel's thoughts spun wildly. If everything you're saying is true, why help me? Torvin stepped closer again. His silver eyes softened slightly. Because I made a promise to your father. Her throat tightened. You knew him. He saved my life. Torvin glanced toward the distant mountains, and before he vanished, he asked me to protect you if the time ever came. The time for what? Torvin looked back at her stomach. For this. The baby. A slow, powerful warmth spread through her chest, mixed with fear and confusion. You think my child is important because of some ancient myth? Not a myth. Torvin's voice hardened. A prophecy. Lyriel's patience snapped. Stop talking in riddles. Fine. He pointed toward the Iron Ridge peaks, barely visible through the storm. Tomorrow night the council will arrive. I know. Among them will be a man named Brenner Solvik. Lyriel frowned. The elder? Torvin nodded. He has spent 20 years hunting the last royal bloodline. Her fingers tightened around the pendant. Why? Because the royal line has the power to command every wolf in the northern territories. Her pulse quickened. You're saying my child could unite them, Torvin finished quietly. The storm roared around them. Lyriel's thoughts raced back to the Alpha Hall. Seraphine's cold smile, Kedron's silence, the alliance with Thornvale. Suddenly everything made more sense. The council, the marriage announcement, the rejection. They weren't just hiding a scandal, they were protecting power. She lifted her gaze slowly. Kedron knew. Torvin didn't answer. His silence was enough. A sharp pain twisted through her chest. Not from the pregnancy, from betrayal. He had known. He had known exactly what she was, and still cast her aside. Lyriel inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Then she closed her fingers around the glowing pendant. What do we do? Torvin studied her carefully. First, we get you off this mountain, and then, the faintest hint of a smile touched his scarred face, then we make sure the council regrets ever coming here. Far away, another howl echoed through the storm, but this one was different, stronger, an army answering a call. Lyriel's wolf lifted its head, listening, and for the first time since Kedron rejected her, something new ignited inside her chest. Not despair, not grief, a spark of power waiting to awaken. The ravine bridge swayed violently in the storm as Lyriel Voss followed Torvin Kael across the narrow planks. Below them, black water roared through jagged stone like a living beast. One wrong step, and the river would swallow them whole. Lyriel gripped the rope rail with numb fingers. The pregnancy made her balance feel slightly off, and every gust of wind threatened to push her sideways. Torvin moved ahead with calm precision, boots steady despite the storm. He glanced back once. Careful, the boards on the far end are weak. Lyriel nodded but said nothing. Her mind was still racing with everything he had told her. Royal bloodline, a prophecy, a council hunting her child. It sounded insane. Yet the pendant in her pocket continued glowing faintly against her palm, warm as a heartbeat. They reached the far side just as lightning split the sky again. The forest beyond the ravine felt darker, older somehow. Torvin stopped beneath a towering cedar tree and scanned the darkness. His expression sharpened instantly. We're not alone. Lyriel's wolf reacted the same moment. Scent flooded her senses, wet fur, iron, and unfamiliar pack markers. 3 wolves stepped out from the shadows. Their eyes gleamed yellow in the rain. Enforcers, but not. Iron Ridge. Torvin cursed under his breath. Thornvale scouts. Lyriel stiffened. Already? The council travels with escorts, Torvin said quietly. Looks like some arrived early. The lead scout shifted into human form with practiced ease. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a dark braid hanging down his back. His gaze landed immediately on Lyriel. Well, he said slowly, that was easier than expected. Torvin moved slightly in front of her. Turn around. The scout laughed. You're the rogue commander. His eyes narrowed with recognition. Torvin Kale. 2 more wolves stepped forward behind him. Lyriel's pulse quickened. "How many?" she whispered. "Too many if we fight here," Torvin muttered. The scout crossed his arms. "You know why we're here." Lyriel stayed silent. The man's gaze drifted to her stomach. His smile turned cruel. "The council will be very pleased." Rage flashed through her chest. Torvin's voice dropped dangerously low. "Take one more step and you lose that smile." The scout didn't move. "You can't protect her forever." He snapped his fingers. The 2 wolves behind him lunged forward. Everything happened at once. Torvin shifted mid-motion, bones snapping as a massive silver wolf exploded into the storm. Lyriel stumbled back as the wolves collided. Fur, claws, and teeth flashed through the rain. One scout slammed into the ground with a howl. Torvin's wolf tore across his shoulder before the second attacker tackled him sideways. The forest erupted with snarls and splintering branches. Lyriel's wolf surged forward instinctively, but she forced it down. She couldn't risk shifting. Not while pregnant. Instead, she grabbed a fallen branch and swung it hard at the nearest wolf's head. The animal yelped and staggered back. The leader cursed and shifted, transforming into a massive gray wolf. His teeth bared toward her. Lyriel backed away slowly. "You don't want this fight," she said. The wolf growled and lunged. Before it reached her, Torvin crashed into it from the side. The impact sent both wolves tumbling through mud and leaves. Lyriel watched in stunned silence. Torvin's wolf was enormous, larger than any she had ever seen. Silver fur shimmered even in the rain. The Thornvale wolf tried to bite his throat. Torvin slammed him into a tree instead. Bones cracked. The gray wolf collapsed with a whine. The other scout limped away into the darkness, bleeding heavily. Torvin stood over the defeated wolf, chest heaving. For a moment, Lyriel thought he might kill it. Instead, he stepped back and shifted into human form again. The Thornvale scout crawled away before disappearing into the forest. Torvin wiped rain from his face. "They'll report this." Lyriel exhaled slowly. "Then the council will know I'm alive." "They already assumed that." He grabbed her wrist gently. "Now they know where." Thunder rumbled again across the mountains. Lyriel glanced toward Iron Ridge in the distance. Somewhere beyond those cliffs, Kadrin was preparing to greet the council, while pretending she never existed. Her chest tightened. Torvin noticed. "Still thinking about him?" Lyriel looked away. "He rejected me in front of everyone." Torvin's expression hardened slightly. "Alpha politics make cowards out of powerful men." "That doesn't make it hurt less." Torvin studied her quietly for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. "Your wolf still recognizes him." Lyriel stiffened. "I know." The bond wasn't gone. Even now she could feel the faint thread connecting them somewhere far away. Weak but alive. It made the betrayal worse. Torvin stepped back and gestured deeper into the forest. "We need to keep moving." They walked for nearly an hour through dense woodland before the trees finally thinned. A narrow valley opened ahead, hidden between cliffs. Small fires flickered among wooden structures scattered across the clearing. Lyriel stopped in surprise. "A settlement?" Torvin nodded. "A refuge." As they approached, several figures stepped out to meet them. Warriors mostly, but none carried pack markings. Rogues. Yet their movements were disciplined, organized. A tall woman with braided copper hair stepped forward first. Her sharp green eyes landed on Lyriel instantly. "So this is her," the woman said quietly. Torvin nodded. "Lyriel Voss." The woman studied her for a long moment. Then she gave a small, respectful nod. "Welcome to Ravenfall." Lyriel blinked. "You knew I was coming?" "Torvin told us years ago we might need to prepare." The woman smiled faintly. "I'm Isolde Thornvale." Lyriel froze. Thornvale. The name echoed like a warning bell. Torvin watched her reaction carefully. "She's not your enemy." Lyriel looked between them in disbelief. "Wait." Her voice sharpened. "The Alpha of Iron Ridge is supposed to marry someone named Isolde Thornvale." The woman burst out laughing. "He can try." Confusion flooded Lyriel's thoughts. "What?" Isolde crossed her arms with amusement. My brother arranged that alliance without asking me. Torvin smirked slightly. She declined. Lyriel stared at her. You refused an alpha marriage? Isolde's smile faded into something colder. I refuse being used as a political trophy. The firelight flickered across her face as she added quietly, especially for a man who betrays his mate. Lyriel felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. Not hope exactly, but the first hint that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. High above the valley, unseen by any of them, a lone wolf watched from the cliff edge. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Cadron Halvern had followed her trail all the way to Ravenfall, and the scent of her blood and the unborn child was driving his wolf mad. Firelight flickered across the wooden hall of Ravenfall as Lyriel Voss sat quietly near the long table. Her wet cloak had been replaced with a dry wool blanket, but the chill inside her chest refused to fade. Around her, the rogue settlement moved with controlled energy. Warriors sharpened blades. Scouts whispered over maps. No one looked surprised to see her. That unsettled her more than anything. Isolde Thornvale leaned against the table across from her, arms folded, studying her carefully. You're calmer than I expected, she said. Lyriel gave a faint, humorless smile. After tonight, shock is starting to feel normal. Torvinkale entered the hall carrying a small leather pouch. Rain still clung to his coat. Scouts confirmed the council arrived at Iron Ridge an hour ago. Lyriel's stomach tightened instantly. Already? Torvin nodded. And Brennar Solvik is with them. The room grew quiet. Even the warriors along the walls seemed to tense at that name. Lyriel watched their reactions carefully. You're all afraid of him. Isolde spoke bluntly. You should be too. Lyriel lifted her chin. Why? Torvin placed the pouch on the table and opened it. Inside lay several old parchment scrolls sealed with dark wax. Because Brennar Solvik has spent 2 decades destroying every trace of the Lunar Crown. Lyriel frowned. Why would the council allow that? Torvin unrolled one parchment slowly. The ink had faded with age, but the symbols remained clear. A wolf beneath a crescent moon. Because the royal bloodline threatens their power. Lyriel leaned closer. You keep saying royal bloodline like it means something real. Torvin looked at her directly. It means command. The word hung in the air. Command? She repeated. Isolde stepped forward now. The wolves born of the Lunar Crown can control other wolves through instinct alone. Lyriel blinked. That's impossible. Torvin didn't argue. Instead, he asked quietly, Have you ever noticed other wolves reacting strangely around you? She opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Warriors stepping aside during patrols without realizing why. Pack wolves lowering their heads instinctively when she walked past. Even Draven, the beta, had once obeyed a command she didn't remember giving. Her chest tightened. That was coincidence. Torvin shook his head slowly. Your father could silence entire battlefields with a single word. Lyriel stared at the parchment again. If that were true, the council would never have allowed him to live. Torvin's expression darkened. They didn't. Silence spread across the room. Lyriel felt her pulse quicken. What happened to him? Torvin hesitated. For the first time since meeting him, uncertainty crossed his face. He vanished during a council trial. That's not an answer. It's the only one anyone has. Lyriel leaned back slowly, processing everything. Her father, a royal wolf, executed by the council, and now they were hunting her child. The baby shifted faintly again. Her hand instinctively covered her stomach. Isolde noticed. You should rest. Lyriel shook her head. Rest won't change anything. Torvin rolled up the parchment again. No, but planning might. Lyriel looked between them. Planning what? Torvin's silver eyes gleamed in the firelight. How to survive tomorrow night. Isolde pulled another map across the table. It showed the northern territories divided into packlands. Ironridge, Thornvale, several smaller clans, and the central council domain. Lyriel studied it carefully. What happens tomorrow night? Torvin tapped Ironridge territory with one finger. The council holds their summit, Isolde added, and announces the new alliances. Lyriel understood instantly. Including Kegdrin's engagement, Torvin nodded. The words stung, but she forced herself to stay focused. And they'll be looking for me. Yes, Torvin's voice dropped slightly. But that's not the real danger. Lyriel frowned. Then what is? Isolde answered quietly. The ceremony. Lyriel blinked. What ceremony? Torvin unrolled another scroll. This one showed a circular stone altar carved with ancient runes. Lyriel's wolf reacted immediately. Fear, recognition. What is that place? She whispered. Torvin's jaw tightened. The Moonwell. The room seemed to grow colder. Lyriel felt the name settle into her bones. I've heard stories. Those stories are true, Isolde said softly. The Moonwell is where the council seals power between pacts. Lyriel's stomach dropped. You mean the alliance ceremony? Torvin nodded once. But this time it's different. Lyriel looked at him sharply. How? Torvin's voice lowered. Because Brenner Solvik plans to use the Moonwell to confirm the extinction of the Lunar Crown. Her heart skipped. Meaning? Isolde's expression turned grim. Meaning, if they capture you, they will sacrifice you there. Silence slammed into the room. Lyriel felt the blood drain from her face. Sacrifice? Torvin didn't soften the truth. Your blood would break the royal line permanently. Her hand trembled slightly against her stomach. And my child? No one answered. They didn't need to. Lyriel stood slowly, forcing air back into her lungs. Outside the hall, the storm had begun to fade. Moonlight slipped through the clouds, pale and cold. She walked toward the doorway. Torvin followed. Where are you going? She stopped at the threshold and looked up at the moon. Something strange stirred inside her chest again. Not fear this time. Something older, stronger. You said the Moonwell is ancient, Torvin nodded. Older than the packs. Lyriel turned back toward him. Then maybe it remembers the truth better than the council does. Isolde frowned slightly. What are you thinking? Lyriel met their gazes steadily. If the council wants a ceremony? Her wolf stirred with quiet power. Then we give them one. Torvin studied her carefully. You're talking about walking straight into their summit. Yes. Isolde blinked in surprise. That's suicide. Lyriel shook her head slowly. No. Her voice steadied with growing certainty. It's exposure. Torvin's silver eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You think the Moonwell will react to your blood? Lyriel didn't know why, but deep inside she felt the answer already. I think it will reveal the truth. A long silence followed. Then Torvin smiled faintly. Your father would have liked you. Lyriel didn't smile back, because somewhere far beyond Ravenfall, on a cliff above the valley, golden eyes were still watching her. Kedron Halvern had heard every word, and the moment she mentioned the Moonwell, his wolf began to howl. Moonlight spilled across the Ravenfall Valley as Lyriel Voss stepped outside the hall. The storm had finally passed. Clouds drifted apart slowly, revealing a pale silver moon hanging above the cliffs. The night air smelled of wet pine and distant stone. She wrapped the wool blanket tighter around her shoulders, but her mind refused to settle. Behind her, the doors creaked open. Torvin Kale stepped out quietly. You should sleep. Lyriel shook her head. Too much to think about. Torvin leaned against the wooden railing beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The valley below flickered with small campfires where rogue warriors kept watch. Finally, Lyriel broke the silence. You said my father saved your life. Torvin nodded once. Years ago. She turned toward him. Where? His gaze drifted toward the mountains beyond Ravenfall. At the Moonwell. Lyriel's chest tightened. You were there? Yes. Torvin's voice grew quieter. The night the council tried to execute him. Lyriel stared at him. You watched them kill my father. Torvin's jaw clenched slightly. No. That single word made her heart skip. What do you mean, no? Torvin hesitated before answering. Because they didn't. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Lyriel stepped closer. You just said he vanished. He did. Then what happened? Torvin's silver eyes met hers. Your father defeated them. Lyriel blinked in disbelief. That's impossible. Torvin shook his head slowly. The council believed the royal bloodline had weakened over generations. They were wrong. He looked toward the moon again. When they tried to bind him at the Moonwell, something ancient awakened. Lyriel felt her wolf stir uneasily. What kind of power? Torvin spoke carefully. The kind that makes alphas kneel. Silence fell between them. Lyriel's heart pounded harder now. If my father escaped, why didn't he come back for me? Torvin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled something else from his coat, a small folded letter sealed with dark wax. Lyriel's breath caught. That seal. Your father's. Torvin handed it to her slowly. He gave it to me the night he disappeared. Her fingers trembled as she broke the wax. The parchment inside had only one line written in sharp black ink. Protect her until the moon calls her home. Lyriel read the words twice. Her throat tightened. He knew. Torvin nodded quietly. He knew the council would hunt you eventually. So he just vanished? No. Torvin's gaze sharpened slightly. He went to war. Lyriel looked up. Against who? Torvin didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the northern horizon. Far beyond the mountains, faint red glows flickered along the sky. Lyriel frowned. Fires? Torvin's expression darkened. Battles. Her pulse quickened. Battles where? Council territory. Lyriel's mind raced. You're saying someone has been attacking them? Torvin nodded once. For 10 years. A sudden realization struck her chest. My father. Torvin didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. Lyriel's breathing quickened. If he's alive, Torvin cut her off gently, then he is still fighting. The weight of that possibility crashed over her. Her father might still be out there somewhere beyond the mountains, somewhere the council could not control. She looked down at the letter again. Protect her until the moon calls her home. The words echoed strangely in her mind. What does that mean? She whispered. Torvin followed her gaze to the moon above them. It means tomorrow night. Lyriel looked back up sharply. Why tomorrow? Torvin's voice dropped. Because the Moonwell awakens only once every 20 years. A chill slid down her spine. During the council ceremony? Yes. Torvin folded his arms. Which means tomorrow night the Moonwell will reveal the truth of the royal bloodline. Lyriel felt something deep inside her chest respond to that thought. A faint warmth, like an ember slowly catching flame. Before she could speak again, a sharp howl echoed from the cliffs above Ravenfall. Every warrior in the valley froze instantly. Torvin's head snapped upward. Damn! Lyriel followed his gaze. A massive black wolf stood silhouetted against the moonlight on the ridge above. Golden eyes burned through the darkness. Her heart stopped. Even at this distance, she recognized that presence. Cadrin Halvorn. The alpha leapt from the cliff and landed halfway down the rocky slope below. Several Ravenfall warriors rushed toward him immediately. Torvin cursed under his breath. Stay here. But Lyriel had already stepped forward. Her wolf stirred painfully inside her chest as Cadrin approached the valley floor. He shifted mid-stride, transforming into human form before the warriors could reach him. His clothes were soaked from travel. Mud streaked his boots, yet his golden eyes never left Lyriel. The warriors hesitated, uncertain. Torvin stepped between them instantly. You're not welcome here. Cadrin ignored him completely. His gaze remained locked on Lyriel. We need to talk. Lyriel's heart pounded violently. You already said everything you needed to say. Cadrin's jaw tightened. Lyriel! Torvin cut him off with a growl. One more step and I break your legs. The tension between them crackled like lightning. Kadrin finally glanced at Torvin. Recognition flashed across his face. The rogue commander. Torvin didn't smile. The coward Alpha. Kadrin's eyes narrowed dangerously. Lyriel stepped forward before either of them could escalate. "Why are you here?" she demanded. Kadrin looked at her again. Something raw flickered in his expression now. Not cold, not distant, desperate. "Because you're in danger." Lyriel laughed bitterly. "I noticed." Kadrin shook his head sharply. "You don't understand." "Then explain." His voice lowered. "The council isn't just hunting you." The valley seemed to grow quieter around them. "They're hunting the child." Lyriel's stomach tightened instinctively. "I already know that." Kadrin's gaze softened slightly. "Then you also know the Moonwell ceremony will expose you." Lyriel lifted her chin. "That's exactly why I'm going." Kadrin froze. "You're what?" Torvin crossed his arms. "She plans to reveal the truth." Kadrin stared at Lyriel like she had lost her mind. "That will get you killed." Lyriel's wolf growled softly. "Or it will destroy the council." Kadrin stepped closer, despite Torvin's warning glare. "You don't understand what the Moonwell can do." Lyriel met his gaze steadily. "Then tell me." Kadrin's voice dropped to a whisper. "It doesn't just reveal royal blood." A strange tension spread through the valley. "It reveals true mates." Lyriel's breath caught. Kadrin's golden eyes burned with something fierce and desperate. "And if the Moonwell exposes our bond," his voice broke slightly, "the entire council will know I lied." Silence swallowed the Ravenfall Valley. The moon hung high above the cliffs, pale and watchful, while every warrior in the clearing stared between Lyriel Voss and Kadrin Halvern. The Alpha's words still hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. "It reveals true mates." Lyriel felt her pulse hammering inside her ears. Her wolf stirred painfully, the invisible thread between them pulling tighter with every second he stood near her. Torvin stepped forward first, his silver eyes sharp. "You're saying the Moonwell exposes bonds?" Kadrin nodded once, never looking away from Lyriel. "Cannot be fooled." Torvin folded his arms slowly. "Then you lied to your entire pack tonight." Kadrin's jaw tightened. "Yes." Murmurs rippled through the Ravenfall warriors nearby. Lyriel's voice came out quiet but steady. "Why?" Kadrin hesitated. For the first time since she met him, uncertainty flickered across his face. "Because if the council discovered the truth before the ceremony—" His gaze dropped briefly to her stomach. "They would have executed you immediately." Torvin scoffed. "So your solution was public humiliation?" Kadrin shot him a cold glance. "My solution was buying time." Lyriel crossed her arms over her chest. "You called my child a lie." The words trembled despite her effort to stay calm. Kadrin's expression softened slightly. "I had to." "You didn't have to enjoy it." His shoulders stiffened. "You think I enjoyed it?" Lyriel's wolf snarled quietly beneath her skin. "I think you're very good at pretending I don't exist." Kadrin took another step closer before the Ravenfall warriors blocked him again. "Lyriel, stop saying my name like you care." The words hit harder than she expected. A flicker of pain crossed his eyes. Torvin noticed. His gaze sharpened slightly as if evaluating something unseen. Finally, Kadrin exhaled slowly and spoke again. "The council suspects the royal bloodline survived." Lyriel already knew that part, but hearing it from him made the reality heavier. "And you think the Moonwell will prove it?" "Yes." Kadrin glanced toward Torvin briefly. "Which means tomorrow night every Alpha in the north will be watching that altar." Lyriel lifted her chin. "Good." Kadrin frowned. "You're not understanding." "I understand perfectly." Her voice hardened now. "You rejected me in front of the entire pack." Kadrin flinched slightly. "To protect you." "You protected yourself." Torvin watched the exchange quietly, saying nothing. Lyriel continued, the words spilling faster now. "You protected your alliance with Thornvale, your power, your reputation." Kadrin shook his head. That alliance is fake. Lyriel blinked. What? Isolde Thornvale stepped forward from the shadows with a dry smile. I told you earlier. She looked at Kadrin. My brother tried to arrange the marriage. Kadrin gave a brief nod. I refused it. Lyriel's mind spun. Then why announce it? Kadrin answered quietly. Because the council expects it. Torvin raised an eyebrow. So you staged an engagement to mislead them? Yes. Kadrin's gaze returned to Lyriel again. And rejecting you made the lie believable. The valley grew quiet again. Lyriel's emotions twisted into something complicated now. Anger still burned in her chest, but doubt crept in beside it. You could have told me, she said softly. Kadrin's voice dropped. No. Why not? Because the council has spies everywhere. He glanced toward the dark forest beyond the valley. If anyone heard even a hint of truth, his eyes returned to her stomach. You wouldn't have survived the night. Lyriel didn't answer immediately. The baby shifted faintly again beneath her palm, a reminder that none of this was just about pride anymore. Torvin broke the silence. Even if what you're saying is true, it doesn't change tomorrow. Kadrin nodded slowly. No. Torvin tilted his head slightly. So why come here? Kadrin's answer came without hesitation. Because she cannot face the Moonwell alone. The words settled heavily between them. Lyriel studied his face carefully now. The storm, the long journey, the tension in his posture. He had followed her through the mountains without rest. Why? She asked again. This time his answer sounded raw. Because if the Moonwell confirms the bond, he swallowed slightly, and I will kneel. Torvin frowned. What does that mean? Kadrin's voice turned grim. The alpha who rejects his true mate loses the right to lead. A wave of murmur spread through the Ravenfall warriors again. Lyriel felt the impact of those words like a physical weight. You would lose Iron Ridge. Kadrin nodded. Yes. Your pack would exile you. Probably. Lyriel stared at him, stunned. Then why risk it? Kadrin looked directly into her eyes. Because the child deserves the truth. Her breath caught. The sincerity in his voice cut through her anger like a blade. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Torvin spoke again. The council won't allow the ceremony to finish if they realize who she is. Kadrin nodded. I know. They'll try to kill her before the Moonwell activates. Yes. Torvin's silver eyes gleamed. Then tomorrow night becomes a battlefield. Kadrin didn't hesitate. It already is. Lyriel finally spoke again, her voice calmer now. If I go to the Moonwell, and it reveals the royal bloodline, she looked between them. What happens next? Torvin answered first. Every wolf in the north will feel it, Kadrin added quietly, including the council armies. Lyriel frowned. Feel what? Torvin's voice lowered slightly. The command. Her wolf stirred violently at that word again. Kadrin stepped closer now, ignoring the warriors blocking him. This time they didn't stop him. The royal bloodline doesn't just rule by title, he said. It rules by instinct. Lyriel's pulse quickened. Meaning? Kadrin's golden eyes burned in the moonlight. Meaning if the Moonwell awakens your power. He paused slightly. Every alpha there will be forced to kneel. The valley went completely silent. Lyriel felt the weight of that possibility crash over her. Destroy the council. Expose the truth. Protect her child. Her wolf lifted its head slowly inside her chest, and for the first time since the rejection, the bond between her and Kadrin didn't feel like pain. It felt like a weapon. Far beyond the valley, across the mountains, the ancient stones of the Moonwell began to glow faintly beneath the rising moon. Dawn crept slowly over the Ravenfall Valley, painting the cliffs with pale gold light. Lyriel Voss stood at the edge of the ridge overlooking the forest below. The night's tension still clung to the air like fog. She hadn't slept. Her thoughts kept circling the same questions. The Moonwell, the royal bloodline, Kadrin kneeling before the council, and the child growing quietly inside her. Behind her, boots crunched softly over gravel. She didn't turn. "You're terrible at resting." Kadrin's voice carried across the ridge. Lyriel exhaled slowly. "You're terrible at leaving people alone." He stepped beside her, staring out over the valley. For a moment neither spoke. The early morning air smelled of damp earth and pine. Finally, Lyriel broke the silence. "If the Moonwell exposes the truth," Kadrin waited, "will you regret coming here?" His answer came without hesitation. "No." She glanced sideways at him. "Even if you lose your pack?" "Iron Ridge was never worth losing you." The quiet honesty of the words made her chest tighten. Lyriel quickly looked away before he could notice. Footsteps approached from behind them again. Torvinkale joined them on the ridge, carrying a rolled map. His expression was serious. "Scouts returned." Kadrin immediately focused on him. "How many?" Torvin unrolled the map across a flat stone. 5 council escorts arrived at Iron Ridge overnight. Lyriel frowned. "That seems small." Torvin shook his head. "Those are just the visible forces." His finger tapped the forest lines around Iron Ridge territory. "Hidden patrols everywhere." Kadrin nodded grimly. "Brenner Solvik doesn't trust anyone." Torvin looked at Lyriel. "Especially you." She crossed her arms slowly. "Then we stop hiding." Kadrin and Torvin exchanged a brief glance. "You still plan to walk into the summit?" Torvin said. "Yes." Kadrin frowned slightly. "That plan hasn't improved with daylight." Lyriel lifted her chin. "It doesn't need to." Torvin studied her expression carefully. "The moment the council sees you, they'll try to kill you." "Not if the ceremony begins first." Kadrin tilted his head. "You're assuming we can reach the Moonwell before they stop us." Lyriel pointed at the map. "Where is it exactly?" Torvin moved his finger to a circular clearing just beyond Iron Ridge territory. "Here," Kadrin nodded. "Ancient ground, neutral territory between packs." Lyriel traced the surrounding forest thoughtfully. "Which means the council won't expect us to approach from the mountains." Torvin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're thinking like a hunter." She gave a faint smile. "I was trained by one." Kadrin's mouth twitched despite the tension. Torvin rolled the map again. "We move at sunset." Lyriel turned toward the valley. "Then we prepare." The rest of the day passed in controlled chaos. Ravenfall warriors sharpened weapons and packed supplies. Scouts rotated constantly along the forest edges. The air buzzed with quiet determination. Lyriel spent most of the afternoon inside the hall with Isolde Thornvale. The copper-haired warrior laid several blades across the table. "You know how to fight?" Lyriel nodded. "Iron Ridge training." Isolde handed her a narrow dagger. "Good. But tonight isn't about winning battles." Lyriel tested the blade's balance. "It's about surviving long enough to reach the Moonwell." Isolde smiled slightly. "Exactly." Lyriel slipped the dagger into her belt. A sudden wave of dizziness passed through her. She steadied herself against the table. Isolde noticed immediately. "The pregnancy?" Lyriel nodded slowly. "Still early, but..." She pressed a hand to her stomach. "Everything feels sharper." Isolde's expression softened. "You're carrying more than a child." Lyriel looked at her. "What do you mean?" Isolde shrugged lightly. "Royal blood tends to react strongly when ancient magic awakens." Lyriel wasn't sure she liked the sound of that. By late afternoon, the sky darkened again with heavy clouds. Torvin gathered everyone outside the hall. About 20 Ravenfall warriors stood ready. Kadrin stepped forward beside Lyriel. His presence still felt dangerously familiar. Torvin addressed them all calmly. "Tonight we escort Lyriel to the Moonwell." His silver eyes swept across the group. "No unnecessary. Fights, no heroics." A few warriors nodded grimly. Torvin continued. "If the ceremony begins before the council stops us," he looked at Lyriel, "everything changes." Lyriel inhaled slowly, steadying herself. The moon began rising behind the cliffs. The moment had arrived. They left Ravenfall just after sunset. The journey through the forest felt tense and silent. No one spoke. Every snapping twig sounded like an ambush waiting to happen. After nearly 2 hours, the trees thinned. A faint glow appeared ahead through the branches. Torvin raised his hand for everyone to stop. "That's the clearing." Lyriel stepped forward carefully. Through the final line of trees, she could see it clearly now. The Moonwell, a circular ring of ancient stone pillars surrounding a glowing pool of silver water. Dozens of wolves already stood around the clearing. Alphas, betas, council guards, and at the center, Brenar Solvik. The elder looked exactly as she imagined, tall, thin, cold eyes beneath white hair. His voice echoed across the clearing as he addressed the gathered packs. "Tonight we confirm the extinction of the royal bloodline." Lyriel's heart pounded violently. Torvin whispered beside her, "Wait for the signal." Kadrin touched her arm lightly. "Stay behind me." Lyriel shook her head slowly. "No." She stepped out from the trees before either man could stop her. Gasps spread instantly across the clearing. Brenar Solvik turned toward her with deadly calm. His eyes gleamed with recognition. "Well," he said softly, "the lost princess finally arrives." Every wolf in the clearing turned toward Lyriel Voss. The Moonwell glowed behind Brenar Solvik like liquid silver under the rising moon. For a long moment, no one moved. Then murmurs began spreading through the gathered packs. "That's the Iron Ridge girl. The one the Alpha rejected. She's pregnant." Brenar Solvik raised one thin hand, and the noise stopped. Instantly, his pale eyes studied Lyriel carefully. "I must admit," he said calmly, "I expected you to run farther." Lyriel walked forward slowly, ignoring the dozens of warriors staring at her. "Running would have been easier." Brenar smiled faintly, "but not very royal." The word rippled through the clearing like a shockwave. Several alphas shifted uneasily. Kadrin stepped out of the trees behind her now, his presence drawing even more gasps. Brennar's eyes flicked toward him. "Alpha Halvern." Kadrin said nothing. He simply moved to stand beside Lyriel. Brenar tilted his head slightly. "Strange." His voice carried easily across the clearing. "Yesterday, you claimed this woman was not your mate." Kadrin's jaw tightened. "I lied." A wave of whispers exploded among the council members. Brennar's smile widened slowly. "How fascinating." His gaze returned to Lyriel's stomach. "And the child?" Kadrin's answer came sharp and clear. "Mine." The clearing erupted again. Several council guards stepped forward instantly. Brenar lifted his hand again, silencing them. "You disappoint me, Alpha." Kadrin didn't flinch. "I'm used to disappointing tyrants." Torvin and the Ravenfall warriors emerged from the trees now as well, spreading quietly along the edges of the clearing. Brenar noticed them immediately. His smile faded slightly. "Ah, the rogue commander joins us." Torvin's silver eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "You look older, Brenar. And you still look rebellious." Brenar turned slowly back to Lyriel. "So this is the final act." Lyriel lifted her chin. "No." Her voice carried stronger than she expected. "This is the beginning." Brenar chuckled softly. "Of course." He gestured toward the glowing pool of the Moonwell. "Shall we test that theory?" The council guards tightened their formation around the altar. Several alphas stepped closer to watch. Kadrin leaned toward Lyriel. "Once the ceremony starts, they can't interrupt it." "Why?" she whispered. "Ancient law." He glanced toward the Moonwell. "If they break it, the well turns against them." Torvin added quietly from her other side. "But they can still kill you before you touch the water." Lyriel nodded slowly. "Then we move quickly." Brenar spread his arms theatrically. "Come forward, child of the royal bloodline." Lyriel walked toward the altar. Each step across the clearing felt heavier than the last. Her wolf stirred uneasily. The Moonwell's glow intensified as she approached. Kadrin and Torvin stayed close behind her. Brenar watched with sharp curiosity. "Tell me something, girl," he said. Lyriel stopped a few feet from the glowing water. "What?" Brennar's pale eyes gleamed. "Do you actually believe you are royalty?" Lyriel's hand rested lightly on her stomach. "I believe my child deserves to live." Brenar sighed dramatically. "Such noble intentions." Then his voice hardened. Unfortunately, the world cannot risk another Lunar Crown. He snapped his fingers. The council guards rushed forward instantly, but the moment their boots crossed the outer ring of stones, the Moonwell exploded with silver light. The guards staggered back as if struck by lightning. Brennar's expression darkened. Torvin grinned faintly. "Ancient law," he reminded him. Lyriel stepped inside the ring of pillars. The air changed immediately. The ground beneath her feet felt warm, alive. The Moonwell's water shimmered brighter with every step she took. Kadrin followed her inside the circle without hesitation. Brennar's voice cut across the clearing again. "Be careful, Alpha." Kadrin didn't even look at him. Too late for that. Lyriel reached the edge of the glowing pool. The silver water reflected the moon above like a perfect mirror. Her wolf surged forward suddenly, drawn toward it. Kadrin touched her shoulder gently. "Once your blood touches the water, the ceremony begins." Lyriel nodded slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the dagger from her belt. The entire clearing held its breath. Brennar watched with cold fascination. "History repeats itself," he murmured. Lyriel sliced her palm quickly before doubt could stop her. Crimson drops fell into the Moonwell. The reaction was instant. The water erupted with blinding light. A shockwave of power blasted outward from the altar. Every wolf in the clearing dropped to one knee with startled growls. Lyriel gasped as something ancient roared through her veins. Her wolf burst forward inside her mind, stronger than ever before. The Moonwell's glow climbed up her arm like liquid moonlight. Kadrin felt it too. His body trembled as the bond between them ignited with overwhelming force. Brennar staggered backward, horror flashing across his face. Impossible. The ancient stones surrounding the well began humming with power. Wolves across the clearing lowered their heads instinctively. One by one, alpha after alpha. Even the council guards collapsed to their knees. The command had awakened. Lyriel's voice echoed across the clearing without her trying to raise it. "Stand down." Every wolf froze instantly. Brennar fought against the invisible pressure, forcing him downward. "You cannot control the council." Lyriel's silver-lit eyes locked onto his. "Watch me." The elder's knees finally slammed against the stone ground. Gasps spread through the clearing as every alpha knelt before her. Kadrin dropped to one knee beside her as well, but unlike the others, he bowed his head willingly. Lyriel looked down at him, heart racing. The Moonwell shimmered brighter, and suddenly a second voice echoed from the water itself, older than the mountains, older than the packs. "The royal bloodline lives." The ancient voice faded slowly across the clearing, but its power remained. Every wolf still knelt. The Moonwell burned with silver light behind Lyriel Voss, illuminating the entire altar like daylight. No one dared move. Brennar Solvik struggled to lift his head. His pale face had gone gray with shock. "This cannot be happening." Lyriel stood perfectly still inside the circle of stones. The power flowing through her veins felt like fire and moonlight woven together. Her wolf was no longer restless. It was awake, fully awake. Kadrin remained on one knee beside her, head bowed, but his golden eyes slowly lifted toward her face. Not fear, not resentment, something deeper. Loyalty. The invisible pressure across the clearing began to shift as the Moonwell's voice spoke again. "Daughter of the Lunar Crown." Lyriel felt the words inside her bones. "Your blood has returned." The water shimmered brighter. Images began flickering across its surface. Wolves from centuries ago. Ancient battles. The rise and fall of the first packs. Lyriel's breath caught as the visions rushed through her mind. The Moonwell continued speaking. The royal bloodline was created to unite the wolves, not rule them through fear. Brennar's voice broke through the silence. Lies. The elder forced himself halfway upright despite the crushing pressure of the command. The Lunar Crown nearly destroyed the council once before. Lyriel looked down at him calmly now. The fear she had felt earlier was gone. No. Her voice carried easily across the clearing. The council destroyed it. Brennar's eyes burned with hatred. Because it was too powerful. Torvin's voice came from the edge of the clearing. Exactly. Several wolves turned their heads slightly toward him. Brennar sneered. You think power like that should exist? Torvin shrugged faintly. Better than corruption. Brennar's voice rose with anger now. The council maintains order. Lyriel stepped forward, slightly, the silver light moving with her. You maintain control. Brennar's jaw tightened. Without control, the packs would tear each other apart. Lyriel looked around the clearing. Dozens of alphas knelt there. Warriors, betas, wolves who had spent their entire lives obeying the council's authority. She raised her hand slowly. Stand. The command echoed through the clearing. Every wolf rose to their feet instantly. The reaction rippled outward like a wave. Even Brennar was forced upright by the power. Shock spread across the gathered packs. Lyriel felt the weight of every gaze on her. Her wolf remained calm, steady. The Moonwell shimmered again behind her. The royal bloodline commands loyalty through instinct, the ancient voice said. But leadership must be chosen. Lyriel understood immediately. This power was not meant to enslave wolves. It was meant to unite them. Brennar saw the shift in her expression and smiled coldly. You see the problem now. Lyriel frowned slightly. What problem? Brennar spread his arms toward the gathered alphas. They will never accept you. Murmurs rippled through the wolves again. Some looked uncertain. Others looked fascinated. Brennar continued. You are a pregnant girl with no pack, no territory, no army. His eyes gleamed with cruel certainty. Power alone does not create a ruler. Lyriel considered his words for a moment. Then she looked toward the alphas standing around the clearing. He's right. The admission surprised everyone. Brennar blinked in confusion. Lyriel continued calmly. Power without trust becomes tyranny. She glanced briefly at the Moonwell behind her. That's what the council became. Brennar's expression darkened. Careful. Lyriel ignored him. Instead, she looked down at Kadrin, still kneeling beside her. Alpha Halvern. Kadrin lifted his head immediately. Yes. Lyriel's voice softened slightly. You said earlier the Moonwell reveals true mates. Kadrin nodded slowly. Yes. Lyriel extended her hand toward him. Then stand. Kadrin rose carefully to his feet. The invisible thread between them pulsed stronger than ever. The Moonwell glowed brighter again, as if confirming the bond. Murmurs spread rapidly through the gathered wolves. One alpha stepped forward from the crowd, a tall gray-haired man from the northern territories. The bond is real. Another alpha nodded slowly. The well confirmed it. Brennar's voice cut through the murmurs sharply. That changes nothing. Lyriel turned toward him again. Actually, it changes everything. Brennar frowned. Explain. Lyriel's voice carried clearly across the clearing. The royal bloodline does not need a throne. She looked toward the gathered alphas again. It needs allies. Silence spread across the clearing as wolves processed her words. Torvin crossed his arms with a faint smile. That's a much smarter move, Lyriel continued. Every pack will remain independent. Several alphas relaxed slightly at that statement. But the council's authority ends tonight. Brennar laughed harshly. You think they will simply accept that? Lyriel's silver-lit eyes met his. No. She lifted her hand again. The command rolled through the clearing like thunder. But they will listen. Brennar felt the invisible pressure tighten again. His knees trembled under the force of it. Lyriel's voice softened slightly as she addressed the alphas. The packs deserve leadership chosen by loyalty, not fear. One by one, the wolves around the clearing began lowering their heads again. Not from command. From respect. Torvin noticed first. Interesting. Kadrin stepped closer beside Lyriel. His voice carried quiet pride. They're choosing. Brennar stared at the scene unfolding around him in disbelief. For the first time in decades, the council had lost control, and standing at the center of it all was the woman he had tried to erase. Lyriel Voss, the last heir of the Lunar Crown. The clearing around the Moonwell grew quieter with every passing second. Wolves stood in a wide circle beneath the moon, their heads lowered, not from Lyriel's command, but from something deeper. respect, acceptance, even curiosity. Brennar Solvik looked around slowly, disbelief spreading across his pale face. Fools, he muttered. You're all fools. No one answered him. Kedron Halvern stood beside Lyriel now, his presence steady and protective. The invisible bond between them hummed quietly in the night air, stronger than ever before. Torvin Kale leaned against one of the ancient stone pillars, watching the crowd with sharp silver eyes. One of the northern alphas stepped forward cautiously. He was older, broad-shouldered, his gray beard braided with small iron rings. If the council loses authority, he said, slowly, what replaces it? Several wolves murmured agreement. Brennar's smile returned instantly. Exactly. He spread his hands dramatically. Without the council, there is chaos. Lyriel stepped forward slightly. The silver glow from the Moonwell still surrounded her like a quiet halo. Not chaos, she said calmly. Choice. Brennar scoffed. Choice leads to war. Torvin spoke without looking at him. So does tyranny. The gray-bearded alpha studied Lyriel carefully. You said the royal bloodline does not seek a throne. It doesn't. Lyriel met his gaze steadily. Then what do you seek? Lyriel glanced briefly down at her stomach before answering. A future where my child isn't hunted for existing. The honesty of the answer seemed to ripple through the wolves gathered there. Even the council guards looked uncertain now. Kedron stepped forward beside her. Iron Ridge will stand with her. Gasps spread through the clearing. One alpha turned sharply toward him. You would abandon the council? Kedron's golden eyes hardened. The council abandoned us long ago. Torvin straightened slightly against the pillar. Ravenfall stands with her as well. Isolde Thornvale stepped forward next, copper braids catching the moonlight. And Thornvale. The clearing erupted into whispers again. 3 powerful territories had just sided with Lyriel openly. Brennar's expression twisted with rage. You're destroying centuries of order. Lyriel turned toward him calmly. You mean centuries of control. Brennar's voice rose sharply. The packs will tear each other apart without the council. Lyriel looked around the clearing again. Wolves from a dozen different territories stood there. Some suspicious, some thoughtful, none openly hostile. Maybe, she said quietly, but they deserve the chance to decide for themselves. The gray-bearded alpha spoke again. And the royal bloodline? Lyriel didn't hesitate. Will exist to protect that choice. Silence followed her words. Then, slowly, the gray-bearded alpha lowered his head. Then, the northern territories acknowledged the Lunar Crown. Another alpha stepped forward. Then another. One by one, wolves across the clearing lowered their heads in quiet acceptance. Brennar staggered backward slightly. No. His voice trembled with fury. This isn't over. Lyriel watched him calmly. You're right. Brennar's eyes gleamed. The council still has armies? Torvin smirked faintly. So do the packs. Brennar's voice dropped to a cold whisper. You think tonight ends the council? Lyriel tilted her head slightly. No. Brennar's smile returned slowly. Good. Lyriel's eyes flashed silver in the moonlight. But it ends your control. Brennar's expression snapped instantly. He lunged forward suddenly, pulling a hidden dagger from his sleeve. The movement was fast, far faster than anyone expected from an elder. The blade flashed toward Lyriel's chest. Kedron reacted instantly. He slammed into Brennar from the side, knocking the dagger off course. The blade sliced across Lyriel's shoulder instead of her heart. Gasps exploded across the clearing. Torvin moved like lightning. His fist connected with Brennar's jaw, sending the elder crashing into the stone ground beside the Moonwell. Council guards rushed forward, but the gathered alphas stepped in their way immediately. The clearing erupted into chaos. Lyriel staggered slightly as blood soaked through her sleeve. Kedron caught her before she could fall. Lyriel. She winced but shook her head. I'm fine. The cut was shallow, but the sight of blood against the glowing Moonwell triggered something unexpected. The water shimmered brighter again. Silver light surged upward around her. The ancient voice echoed across the clearing once more. The crown protects its own. The light flowed over Lyriel's wounded shoulder like liquid moonlight. The cut closed instantly. The entire clearing went silent again. Brennar stared at the healed skin in horror. Impossible. Lyriel slowly straightened. The silver glow faded, but the power remained. She looked down at the elder calmly. You tried to kill a pregnant woman in front of every alpha here. Brennar glared up at her. You're a threat to the world. Lyriel's voice carried across the clearing. No. She gestured toward the wolves surrounding them. I'm its future. Torvin dragged Brennar to his feet and forced him to face the gathered alphas. Your move, Council. The wolves stood silent for a moment. Then the gray-bearded alpha spoke again. Brennar Solvik. His voice was cold now. You attacked under sacred law. Another alpha nodded grimly. Punishment must be given. Brennar's face drained of color. Lyriel looked at him quietly. For a moment she considered revenge. All the fear, the humiliation, the danger to her child. But the Moonwell's voice echoed faintly in her mind again. Leadership must be chosen. She turned toward the gathered wolves. The council ends tonight. Brennar's shoulders sagged. And me? Lyriel met his gaze calmly. You live. Brennar blinked in shock. What? Lyriel's voice remained steady. But you never hold power over wolves again. Torvin smiled faintly. Exile. Kadrin squeezed Lyriel's hand gently. Mercy. Brennar stared at her in disbelief as the guards dragged him away. The Moonwell's light slowly faded behind them. For the first time in centuries, the council was gone. Lyriel exhaled slowly as the tension left her body. Kadrin looked at her softly. What happens now? Lyriel glanced toward the rising dawn on the horizon. Now, she said quietly, we build something better. And beneath her hand, the child of the Raim. Lunar Crown stirred for the first time. Dawn spread fully across the Moonwell clearing, warming the ancient stones that had witnessed the fall of the council only hours earlier. Wolves still lingered across the field, speaking quietly among themselves as the reality of the night settled in. The world they had known was gone. Lyriel Voss stood at the edge of the Moonwell, watching the silver water fade into calm. The glow that had surrounded her during the ceremony had softened, but the power inside her remained steady. Not overwhelming, just present, alive. Kadrin Halvorn stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The tension between them had changed since the night before. The pain of the rejection still lingered, but something stronger had replaced it. Truth. Lyriel rested her hand lightly against her stomach again. The child stirred faintly beneath her palm, as if aware of the quiet peace settling over the clearing. Torvin Kale approached from across the stones, his silver eyes scanning the gathered packs. They're waiting, he said. Lyriel glanced toward the wolves standing beyond the Moonwell circle. Dozens of alphas remained there, speaking in low voices, occasionally glancing toward her. Waiting for what? She asked. Torvin shrugged slightly. Leadership, Lyriel frowned. I told them I wasn't taking the council's place. Kadrin nodded. You didn't. Torvin's mouth curved into a faint smile. But you also ended it. Lyriel sighed quietly. That doesn't mean I want to rule everyone. A voice from behind them spoke calmly. You already don't. They turned to see the gray-bearded northern alpha approaching again, the same wolf who had spoken during the ceremony. He stopped a few steps away and lowered his head respectfully. The packs have discussed it, he said. Lyriel folded her arms gently over her stomach. Discussed what? The alpha gestured toward the gathered wolves behind him. The future. Kadrin watched silently beside her. The gray-bearded alpha continued. The council ruled through fear and secrecy. Lyriel nodded slowly. That's why it had to end. Agreed. The alpha's eyes softened slightly. But the packs still need someone who can call them together when needed. Lyriel tilted her head. You mean an alliance? Exactly. He looked directly at her. One guided by the Lunar Crown. Lyriel hesitated. The Moonwell shimmered faintly behind her as if listening. Not a ruler, she said carefully. A protector. The alpha nodded once. That would be acceptable. Murmurs of agreement spread among the wolves behind him. Torvin crossed his arms with quiet satisfaction. Looks like you're getting the job anyway. Lyriel gave him a dry look. You're not helping. Kadrin finally spoke. You don't have to lead them alone. Lyriel looked up at him. The bond between them pulsed quietly again, warm and steady. You mean Iron Ridge? Kadrin shook his head slowly. I mean us. The words settled gently between them. For the first time since the rejection, Lyriel saw no hesitation in his expression. No politics, no fear, just certainty. She studied his face for a long moment before speaking. You're willing to lose your pack for this? Kadrin gave a faint smile. I already thought I had. Lyriel felt the last remnants of anger loosen inside her chest. Iron Ridge won't lose you, she said quietly. Not after what they saw tonight. Torvin glanced toward the distant tree line where the sun had begun climbing over the mountains. Speaking of things we saw tonight... He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded parchment. There's something you should read. Lyriel accepted it carefully. The seal was unfamiliar, but the handwriting inside made her breath catch. Protect her until the moon calls her home. It was the same line from her father's letter, but beneath it, new words had been added. If she stands at the Moonwell and survives, she is ready. Lyriel looked up slowly. Where did you get this? Torvin pointed toward the mountains beyond the clearing. One of our scouts found it at dawn. Kadrin frowned. Someone left it? Torvin nodded. Recently. Lyriel's heart pounded quietly in her chest. Her father's handwriting. A message delivered the morning after the Moonwell ceremony. She looked toward the distant mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks, a war had been quietly burning for 10 years. Torvin noticed the shift in her expression. You think he's still alive? Lyriel folded the parchment carefully. I know he is. Kadrin stepped closer beside her. Then we'll find him. Lyriel smiled faintly. Eventually. She looked back at the wolves gathered across the clearing. But first we fix what he started. The gray-bearded Alpha bowed his head again. Then the packs stand with you. Lyriel turned toward the rising sun. The Moonwell behind her was calm again, its ancient power resting quietly beneath the surface. The council was gone. The packs were free. And somewhere beyond the mountains, the last war of the Lunar Crown was still waiting to be finished. Beneath her hand, the child stirred again, stronger now. Kadrin noticed and smiled softly. Future Alpha? Lyriel shook her head with a small laugh. Future something. Torvin looked toward the horizon. Whatever that child becomes, the world won't be the same. Lyriel nodded quietly. For the first time in a long time, the future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like something worth building.